The world's best poker coach is about to reveal 7 tactics that you can use to exploit your opponents. I'm Mike Brady, and I'll be learning alongside you today in this special live strategy webinar to celebrate the launch of Upswing Lab 2.0. Let me introduce your strategic mastermind behind Lab 2.0, the man, the myth, the legend, Uri Peleg.
Second, sorry about that. Yeah, I'm a bit nervous. I'm not usually nervous during webinars, so apologies for being a bit slow to. So thank you, Mike, for the introduction. I appreciate it, and I'll just start and get going with why is exploiting and theory, why are they both important? Because we're gonna have a look at both of them in this section, and I'm gonna go through a bit of stuff that if you guys are familiar with my content, you've heard of fundamental mistakes and frequency mistakes, but I'm guessing not everyone is. So I like to divide mistakes in poker into these two types of mistakes, where the idea is that fundamental mistake is one where you win money by virtue of your opponent making the mistake without needing to adjust. So this would be like someone playing any 2 cards from under the gun in a full ring game. He's kind of donating to everyone. You don't need to do anything about it. That's of course an extreme example. Whereas a frequency mistake is one where someone's folding too much or calling too much, and then he's not necessarily doing it with terrible hands, and then unless you adjust, you don't gain win rate. And part of my approach in poker was always to say, it's not enough to play well if you're not capitalizing on your opponent's frequency mistakes, and he is catching some of yours now and then. Even if you have less of them than the other guy, he's actually going to win out over the long run. And so looking for your opponent's mistakes generally is very important to your win rate in poker. But I kind of want to add on to that even with fundamental mistakes, and here we can take the example of someone playing 100% of hands from under the gun. Yes, he's going to leak money to you anyway, but there is an optimal way where he leaks the most amount of money to you, right? So we can really increase our win rate by kind of getting used to this process of recognizing mistakes and then adjusting to them. And doing so with confidence, with preparation, where you're like, you play the hand, you saw showdown, you're like, okay, this is a note I'm taking, these are the adjustments I'm making, and my win rate against this guy is now going to increase. So that's where I want to get you guys starting to move in this seminar. And before I get started, I want to share a story from, I guess this is 8 years ago or 6 years ago. I don't remember exactly. I was working with an extremely talented player and he was break even at NL Zoom 500 on PokerStars back in the day. And this was, I'd taught him theory that was head and shoulders above what his opponents knew. And he was extremely sharp, extremely hardworking. And he was kind of stuck, and it was tough for us to know why. And we put a lot of effort into getting him to break through, and kind of end of story spoiler is that a year later he was beating 2K for like a 7 or 8 BB win rate. But the key to him breaking through was breaking him out of the mindset that he can just play theory and that's good enough, and kind of opening his eyes to all the bad plays the players around him were making, and forcing him to step out of his comfort zone, make adjustments, and kind of take the money the other guys are giving him. And that was the difference, again, between a very hard worker, very smart guy, between a 0 BB win rate and an 8 BB win rate. Okay, so I think we're kind of ready to start with this one.
Yeah, people have been filtering in. So just to kind of talk about what we're going to do today. Uri has collected 7 hands, each of which reveals a serious flaw in the opponent's strategy. The hands go to showdown. You see what they had. You see how they played it. And it really reveals a hole. He's going to then explain how you can go about exploiting that opponent based on what you learn in that hand. If you have any questions as we go, drop them in the chat, and I'll do my best to filter through them and pass them along to Uri. We are going to kind of save some questions for certain periods, so we'll go through our presentation, go through the hands, and then occasionally stop to talk about the questions. So with that said, I'll pass it back to Uri. He can kind of talk about what you're about to learn.
Yeah, so let's see. So we're going to learn, like I said, we're going to go through hands. So this is going to be very hands-on. Some of you, the mistakes might be new. So you learn something new about how to play better. Some of you, the adjustments might be new. And even, adjustments can go quite deep. So you can make a small one, but then you can make a bigger one. So there is room to improve there. Note-taking, sometimes you're going to find the guy in a week. You need to have the note that leads you to make the correct decision. You need to be concise in gleaning the relevant information from the showdown. And yeah, if we have enough time, I actually have extra hands prepared. I'm not sure we'll have enough time to go through more than 7, but really, guys, just so you know, finding 7 misplayed hands at NL 200 is very easy. Like, you just breeze through hands, and every second or third hand there's something that's worth a note and worth an adjustment. So this is, hopefully gonna just directly impact the win rate of people using it. Okay, so this is hand number 1. I'll pull up the replayer and then we'll have a screenshot later on. And Hero is not me. These are just databases that I got from lab members. So defend big blind with queen 8 will still call us hero. This goes check, check. Turn ace of spades, and I'm kind of gonna take you guys in brief through the strategy for out of position. So once in position checks back, he no longer has a betting lead. We now get to develop a betting range. And then depending on the card that falls, we're going to have a different shape to that strategy. So if a low card falls, we're going to bet very wide and we're going to be more protection oriented. Whereas if something like an ace falls, our opponent hits this card so often, we actually have to bet very narrow and very big. We're not really interested in betting a6 or betting 10-9. It's more like 2 pair plus roughly. So this is a spot where you don't get to bluff a lot. You never bluff a hand like queen 8. We're mostly looking to bluff high equity draws. So of course this is a check. Opponent checks back. River 5. At this point, out of position could bluff queen 8. It doesn't have any showdown value in theory, so it is a potential bluff candidate. But there's a ton of air if you look at this board, so it's very easy to get looked up. In practical terms, a lot of guys would stab all of their air on the turn ace if they hadn't bet it on the flop. So I think it's not a great spot to bluff, and Hero does give up, which I like. An opponent checks back, and this is a showdown. And before I give you guys the answers, I want to ask people, what was the mistake made in this hand? And after we spot the mistake, we'll talk about what kind of adjustments we want to make. So
drop your thoughts in chat now. You can either use the YouTube chat, or if you happen to be watching within Lab 2.0, you can use the Discord as well. Any mistakes that you think the in-position player here with the 10-8 of diamonds has made?
Yeah, we're not talking about the pre-defend, but fair enough.
Yeah, fair point. You could fold that. Yeah, and we have a couple people chiming in. Some people saying should bluff turn. Some people saying, a couple people saying bet turn. I think White Ivy kind of hit the nail on the head the most here, though. IP has to bluff at some point with no showdown value here. That's really the key. Perfect. And I think we could debate which street, right? And you'll probably go through that in a moment, Uri. But some money has to go in. He cannot be letting queen high or jack high just win this pot checked down.
Exactly. So the theoretical concept is one of the players has a range advantage, and the guy with a range advantage gets to bluff some of his air, and he gets to do it profitably. So the first bluff is not a 0 EV bluff. Generally in poker, when we get to the river triple barreling on a brick and we think, what's the EV of our bluff? The theoretical answer is 0. But when your opponent got pot odds pre-flop and he 3-bet the top of his range, so you kind of have a clear asymmetry, a clear range advantage for the raiser. The raiser gets to auto profit. This is part of poker theory. And so generally speaking, you never show down 10-8, you never show down jack high. You bluff all the way up to queen high, and queen 8 should have 0 showdown value. And so not betting 10-8, this isn't like not betting queen 10 where maybe queen 10 has to bet but it's on the border, or not betting king 6. This is, the guy missed two to 3 pips of bluffing, and I think it really implies something about how he perceives poker. So to me, the note that I take here, and now we'll go back to the presentation, is that he gives up in small pots, doesn't fight for small pots, basically the note that I'm going to take, or passive in small pots. And this is a note that once you have it, it affects your strategy against the guy quite a lot. And I'll let this sink in, but if you take this showdown and say, okay, cool, I'm happy he gave me a free pot, what a dumbass, you're kind of missing the point, because this guy's giving you a lot more than one free pot in his hand. He's basically telling you, look, when the pot's small, you can run me over when I'm passive and you can overfold when I'm aggressive. So that's kind of the basic thing he's telling you. So any limped pot, any check down to the turn or river pot, right? The guy's 2-barreling you. And again, I'm saying small pot on purpose because even nits fight for 3-bet pots and 4-bet pots. So I don't want you guys to take this and be like, oh, 3-bet pot, he's never bluffing, and then you're basically handing him the money back. Everyone plays poker to bluff at some point, but some guys are waiting for when the pot gets big, and they're kind of not interested in when it's small. It's a very common low to mid stakes leak. It's a very common recreational leak. And when you have this, you get to outplay this guy. So first of all, in this hand, of course, we'd bluff our queen 8 on the river. But beyond kind of outplaying him all the time nonstop, overfolding to his check raises, believing his overbets, whenever the pot's small, right? You can also kind of maneuver your range to take advantage of his leak. So in poker, for example, we often go third pot on the flop, which is a range bet, and the reason to range bet, part of it is to kind of keep your strong hands and your weak hands together, so your opponent can't, you don't check back just weak hands and then he can run you over. But this guy's not going to run you over, quite the contrary, right? So you can kind of check back an ace high against him, confident that he's not going to really attack your check back. He's going to bet into it with good hands and with good draws, and then easy fold.
Yeah, so
right?
there you're actually extrapolating a totally different matchup, right? In that case, we'd be the in-position player, maybe facing his big blind defend. And even in that case, you're saying, let's just check back our ace and king high and just expect to win too often in the check down line.
Yeah, generally speaking, so the way I conceptualize these kind of leaks is, we all have the same amount of good hands and bad hands, and we're supposed to mix them up. So you could think of yourself as a fighter. Sometimes you hit from the right, sometimes you hit from the left. But once a guy tells you, I'm not hitting enough from the left, necessarily he's hitting too much from the right, and then your entire posture against him changes. The way that you maneuver everything against this guy is now different. And I see in the chat Daniel saying, are we defending wider in the big blind? You can actually defend wider everywhere. You can cold call this guy wider. You can defend the blinds wider. This queen 8 is an easy defend against a guy who's letting you, win this kind of showdown. This bluff with 10-8 is like a half a big blind blunder. It is a fundamental mistake, even though it's kind of a nuanced one. It's not an obvious one like the example I gave.
How much wider do you go out of the big blind against this guy now? Let's take a button versus big blind matchup. Are we going super extreme? Are we flicking in the call with 5-4 offsuit here? Or is it just adding a couple of pips maybe?
Well, you're touching on a sensitive subject, because this is the topic of, if he sees you do something out of line, it's going to draw his attention. And we generally, I would say, if this is the last hand in my life I'm playing against this guy, an argument could be made that I'm winning money with 7 deuce offsuit. I wouldn't be shocked that the holes in this guy's strategy are big enough where you actually, almost with no cards, can break even to win defending the big blind. But if he ever sees that, he's gonna be like, oh, this guy's defending 7 deuce offsuit, what do I need to change? And I don't want him to do that. So I would defend wide, but I'd do it with reasonable seeming hands. So queen 8 offsuit, I think, doesn't draw attention. Suited cards generally don't draw attention. You can cold call the guy wider. Anything that's mixed gets in there. Any spot where you get to call down to 7-8 suited, go ahead and call down to 4-5. But yeah, I would say, sorry, I'm getting distracted by the comments. Yeah, I would say definitely wider. And how much wider, you have to play around with it. Depends on how confident you are on acting against his weakness. Because, for example, let's say this is 9-4-5 and turn is a 5. Queen 8 offsuit should mostly check with no heart. But against this guy, you can make a very strong argument that you should bluff it. And if you check it and he bets not big, you should check raise bluff it. And if he checks back, you should bluff any river for an overbet. And those are all insanely printing lines against a player like this. This guy's not going to hero call against an overbet in any kind of small pot. He's not interested in that. So imagine whenever he checks back, you hit him with 2x pot with no equity. So it really depends on how far you're willing to push this guy around. But
so
yeah,
let's kind of put a bow on this exact spot, because I feel like we could talk about it for days, and we got 6 more hands to go over. The key exploits against this player: we start preflop by defending a little bit wider because we're going to over-realize our equity. We definitely respect his bets more, right? Like, we're going to do less floating. We're going to do less, aggressive check raising, especially with like backdoor draws. We're going to stab on turns and rivers, knowing that he's got a little bit too much air. What else?
Yeah, I think those are the main things. Basically, everything kind of stems from his betting range is too strong, his checking range is too weak whenever the pots are small. And you can extrapolate it, like you said, we can go on for hours. But if you have that kind of firmly in your head, I think you're good. And just be creative with how far you want to push it and experiment with a guy. But you can push these things fairly far. Okay, so we'll go to the next hand.
Yeah, and on that note, before we hit the next hand, let's quickly talk about what we launched today of Swing Lab 2.0. It's something that Uri, in particular, has worked outrageously hard on. I think that's why he said early on that he's a little nervous for today's webinar when he normally wouldn't be, because it's a big day. He worked really, really hard on the curriculum for this course, recorded a ton of new content. I don't even know how many hours, but maybe like 100 plus videos for sure. And it really came out incredible. The UI is really great. It makes the next step at all times very, very clear. And I think very notably, it starts with the coaches. Uri put together an awesome team of coaches here. We obviously have the existing lab coaches, and all Lab 2.0 members get access to the original lab. It's still available. You can go check it out at any time. But Uri only took the best modules, in his opinion, from Lab 1.0 and moved some of those into 2.0 in the learning paths. And then he took the time to go out and recruit a number of really strong coaches to make new content for the courses and to make these webinars every week. We're going to be doing these weekly. Can you speak to kind of the team you've put together here, Uri?
Yeah, so basically, I guess the philosophy behind this for me is that I feel like in the modern world, I really respect everyone's time. And so we took the lab before, had a ton of videos, and I took I kind of went through all of them and I made something structured. So how would I teach you poker if we had to go step by step? So everything here is curated, everything is in order. I'm in touch with all the coaches. So as they make new videos, they talk to me about the subject. I give them pointers. So we have kind of a very coherent vision on everything. And the guys we have here, I think Aaron, Barone, and Gary, you guys should know from the lab. They've been here for a long time. They're in a lot of upswing things, and Tim Jenkins as well. Giraffe is one of the most highly acclaimed theory poker coaches. He made a ton of very, very in-depth, very well-explained theory videos, and this is, for me, who I can never watch anyone's theory videos. And this is the only guy I'm able to keep watching and feel like I can learn from. Fimo is, I think, head coach of Feder Holtz's MTT stable. I hope I'm not wrong, but something like that. Extremely good teacher. I've gone through his stuff and spoke to him. We have a very similar approach. Lewis is a nosebleed, high stakes, cash game, MTT, and live player. And the last guy is Avery. And Avery I kind of discovered by accident. He used to be a nosebleed player a long time ago, and he started coaching. And as he was coaching, he started playing NL200 because that's the level the guys he was coaching were playing. And he basically destroyed the limit. He had like an 8 BB win rate over hundreds of thousands of hands. Extremely good coach. Great exploitative style, very organized thought process. And he's kind of, I feel like me, in that he's been there before and after solvers, so he can kind of integrate theory poker and street poker in a way. And it's amazing to watch him play. You guys are, anyone who hasn't watched him will enjoy him quite a lot. He sometimes says these funny sentences like, "This time I choose to bluff all in," where really, he's doing it every second hand. So yeah, that's a long-winded intro. And yeah, Doug, I assume you guys know. So
yeah, and just to be clear about Doug's involvement, he's going to make the occasional piece of content. A lot of his existing content was moved over to Lab 1.0. He's not going to be making a ton of stuff. He's not at the top of his game. He's not studying all the time these days. He mostly plays in, like super soft live games and stuff like that. So he's going to be checking in. He's definitely going to be featured, but don't join Lab 2.0 expecting that you're going to get hundreds of hours of fresh Doug Polk content. That's just not the case. It's not really where he's at in his poker career. Just want to be transparent about that.
We actually refreshed some of his old content. So one of the things I did was I took old Play and Explains from some, like, there are amazing players who made Play and Explain, say 5 years ago or 8 years ago. And I basically recorded myself watching the Play and Explain. And so I explained through like the modern theory and exploitative lens what the guy is doing and what he's thinking and what he's picking up on, what you can learn from him. So I think those have gotten really good feedback, and I'm planning on doing a lot more of those. So you guys will get Doug Play and Explains, but in a different way. We'll see.
I'm gonna try to convince him to make some stuff too. Like, I'm gonna be in his ear bothering him, especially now that we're launched. We can start to bother him about that. You could slide on, Uri. We can talk about the quick discount. So if you aren't a lab member right now, you can head over there for launch week. You can get 25% off. That expires on Friday. So if you want to join, this week is definitely the week to do it. You can go check it out, relatively low price, and then, make sure you like it, decide if you want to stay subscribed. The Discord community is going to be really great as well. I don't want to stretch out this ad too much longer. I want to get back to the strategy, but a lot of really good value there. Just to quickly cover a couple of Lab 2.0 questions before we move on. I promise the ad's almost over. How much of the new lab was made directly by Uri was a question in the chat. I would estimate about 50%. It's hard to say, though, and it's also going to stretch. Like, the other coaches are going to make more and more. Uri really put the lab on his back for the last 6 months, though. He recorded a ton of new stuff. So it might be about 50-60% now is my pure estimate. And then that's probably going to roughly maintain as he makes new content, but the other coaches make new content as well. And then there was another question. Is this more for small to mid-stakes cash games, 200 NL or below, or tournaments? It's for both. We've built this to be the all things no limit hold'em course. So when you get in Lab 2.0, you know that whether you play online cash games, live cash games, tournaments, live or online, there is content that's going to help you level up your game. And really what we're billing this as is your path to poker mastery. No matter where you're at right now, this is going to help you reach pretty much the highest level you can get to. And that's largely going to be achieved by your feedback in the community as you go through it. When we see questions, when we hear about knowledge gaps in the course, Uri is going to make it his mission to fill them. So right now, the mastery path, which is kind of the end game of Lab 2.0, it's built like a skill tree in a video game. So you follow along and build out your skills as you go. Right now, it'll probably take you, if you're watching a ton of content, you could probably get through it, all of it, in maybe a month or two. But we're going to continue to add to it. So it's kind of going to be a never-ending, stream of content. And that tree is just going to get bigger and bigger. And you're going to be adding skills all along the way. So once again, 25% off right now through Friday. Head over to upswingpoker.com to get your hands on that. And with that said, let's get into hand number 2.
Okay, so hand number 2. Here we go. It's going to be this one. So this is actually a splashed pot, so there's $20 in the middle. And for those who don't know, that makes it correct to limp specifically for the first 2 players. I think they're supposed to limp almost everything. And then the next guys can start mixing, having a limping range and a raising range. Everyone should play extremely wide, so this fold on the cutoff is probably wrong, but we're not going to get too much into splash pots. This fold on the small blind is terrible, terrible, terrible. So we get ace 10 7. Hero bets 1/3 pot, gets called. Turn 6 of spades, and here villain checks, and hero checks back. And I'm gonna just discuss the check back. So generally speaking, this is a stack to pot ratio consideration, where when we're deep stacked, we really, really want to barrel with our combo draws because sometimes they make the nuts on the river and we want to have a big pot when they do. But there is a point where if we bet turn big here and our opponent might check shove, and then we'd have to fold a ton of equity. This often happens in 3-bet pots and 4-bet pots, and so in those you'll actually often prefer to be more passive with your highest equity draws, which is counterintuitive. I think we're used to this shortcut of always barrel draws, but I kind of like this check back. I would actually rather go with something like Jack 8 of hearts or Queen 8 of hearts even as a barrel and check this one back because there's less money behind. It's easier to get all in as well. And this is a concept of minimizing regret. So in poker, we often talk about maximizing EV. The way to think about this is, an aspect of maximizing EV is minimizing regret, and that would lead you to understand this play. And yeah, river 9, villain checks, hero bets 75%, and villain min raises. So he's basically like this min raise. The story it's telling is he has an 8, but not Jack 8, right? With Jack 8, he would presumably shove. And if you have an 8 and you decide to raise, I think this is a good size because you need hero to call you wider than a chop to justify this. And a lot of heroes' betting range is going to be an 8. Sometimes it's going to be something like ace 9 maybe, or 10 9. And then this check raise needs to be really small to force those hands to call. Of course, Jack 8 shoves and 10 8 calls. 10 8, this is the showdown. And we're going to talk about the hand. So on the surface, this hand is played fine by both players. But the range of the guy shoving Jack 8, practically speaking, and this is from experience, is actually just Jack 8. Like when you bet and face a min raise, at these stakes, people just call unless they have the super nuts. And the same would happen if Jack 8 would just rip the river himself. This is, I hope I'm explaining it clearly enough. But the idea here is that even though, so first of all, the theory of the spot would say 10-8 should mix calling and folding versus a shove. That would be theory. because your value range is 8x and you're facing a raise, you want to kind of mix. You don't want to always call or always fold. In practice, I would highly recommend always folding. And this is something I kind of learned the hard way. Like, you call in these spots enough times, lose every single one of them, and then you're like, okay, I'll actually... Mike, you want to chime in?
Well, it makes sense because it's so easy to find yourself in this spot with 10-8. And maybe not this exact spot because it was 5 ways to the flop. It was a splash pot. Everyone limped. So it's a little bit different. But you reach these spots where it's a 4-liner to a straight. You have like that inside card that makes the straight. You get jammed on and you think, well, he could be doing this trying to get me off of a chop. That's what you tell yourself. But then what you're positing there is, yeah, you think that. But then you make the call 5 times, 10 times, 20 times. And you eventually, once you're 0 for 20, you're like, damn, people really aren't jamming to get me off the chop. And I'm curious in the chat, do you guys see people really do this very often as Uri's talking?
Yeah, so these are the kind of spots, and you can extrapolate from this, but whenever... Yeah, he could have Jack's blockers is a funny comment. We actually talked about this. I think to have Jack's blockers, he would have had to reopen with Jacks on the river, which I think is not very likely. But yeah, basically, you have to learn this spot through experience. So first of all, I think a lot of people start out always calling 10-8, which is theoretically being a station. And you start out always losing, and after a while, you're going to tell yourself, okay, I can fold the next one. Or some people just keep telling themselves, no, this is just a cooler, and they don't even think about it. So this is me trying to give you guys the benefit of my experience, which I've often done with students, and basically say, you can fold these hands when, you know, the guy is repping the 2-card nuts. It's 10, 9, 8, 7, and you have Jack 10, and suddenly a stack goes in. It's not just a fold. It's actually a snap fold. Like, this call of $130 on the river was probably losing $130. So I'd say be very, very careful. Definitely lean towards overfolding these when a stack goes in. And there's not really an adjustment or a note to make to me, because this is just a very common low to mid stakes tendency. Once you get to high stakes, kind of everyone knows to overfold to these, so you start actually seeing people bluff with these lines, because everyone who's gotten to high stakes has been so conditioned that it's always the nuts at that point that you start seeing people mixing in bluffs. But yeah, this is not to say it's good to bluff. It's people call the 10-8. Like, this is a very commonly played scenario. I think you can increase your win rate by quite a lot by making these folds. And yeah, with that, we'll go to the next hand. Okay. So next hand is going to be this one.
It's a good one.
Yeah. So hero defends king 3 of spades. It's time to a min raise, so no one's going to complain about pre-flop. Jeffrey, I think it's fine to just call the river bet as well, to your question. But if you're raising, it has to be a raise fold. So yeah, checks the flush, check raise, turn ace of clubs, bets the turn. And this is a turn where you guys should already be thinking about the spot actively if you're in position. Because if you're autopiloting, you look at a hand like ace jack with a jack of spades, and you might be like, well, this hand looks like a calling hand, right? Kind of autopilot pattern recognition. But if we kind of step back and ask ourselves, what's the check raise bluffing range for the big blind on the flop? The answer for a lot of people is going to be that they check raise bluff mostly with the ace of spades, maybe sometimes with a king of spades. Now, that isn't to say this is the whole bluffing range. In theory, the bluffing range is supposed to have a bunch of different hand categories in it. You're supposed to raise with a pair of fours. You're supposed to raise with an under pair. You're probably supposed to raise something like, for sure, all sorts of straight draws with a spade. a random pair of nines. Like, there are a lot of hands that are supposed to be in there that are not in there in practice for people at low stakes, because they haven't gotten that far into studying the game tree, so they just intuitively raise the ace. And if people just raise the ace, there's no bluffing range on the turn. And so this isn't even a note, it's just something to think about. But if I were playing here and I'm the in position player, I'd recognize this and I'd be like, this is a spot where on the turn I want to overfold, because best case for me, my opponent has a normal range, but very, very likely he has a very, very under-bluffed range, just due to how tough this is to know what to bluff with. And so I'd already overfold turn quite a lot. Hope that makes sense.
Yeah, just one last quick note on that. Hero went 30 into like 32 on the turn there.
Yeah.
Because we're so deficient for bluffs, or at least like natural, obvious bluffs, when you're betting this turn with King 3 of spades, are you sizing down a bit?
So I always pick a size based on my value range. And I don't care that I'm lacking bluffs. That's kind of the theoretical way to size, is to ask how much does my value range want. And and I'm personally not lacking bluffs, but the thing that you're suggesting is, you're saying, exploitatively speaking, if you look really, really strong and you still want the other guy to call, should you size down? And the answer, I think, is you're right. Exploitatively speaking, yes. I think it would be pragmatic to size down, so that your opponents are less able to make the big folds that they probably should make if they recognize what's going on.
Makes sense. Thanks for going down that train of logic with me. I was curious to hear your thoughts.
Yeah. Okay. Yeah.
So interesting river pairs the board. So now all those sets make full houses. If he somehow has like ace 4 suited, which maybe he doesn't call the flop with that, but he could have a boat with that. Really bad card for us as the out of position player with in general, right? Like this is, we're usually going to have a flush as our value range, and this is pretty bad.
Yeah, this is probably one of the worst rivers. I think a 4th spade would be pretty bad as well. Maybe ace of spades is the worst river. But yeah, our opponent basically rivered 10 combos. So 4s, 6s, 9s, aces, at the least, that now have a speed. By the time a lot of money goes in, 10 combos is a lot of his range, right? So the number of combos he gets to the river with is not that high. 10 combos is probably, I'm throwing numbers out there, but let's say 10 combos is 20% of his river range. And if we bet he gets to fold half his river range, it's going to end up quite a lot of his calling range. So this is a spot where we need to be really careful, and we need to size down with flushes. And here hero bets big. Overplaying his hand gets called, and this is a showdown. So again, I'm going to ask the audience, what's the mistake, and which note would you take, and which adjustments would you make? So we're going to make it kind of a bigger question.
Yeah, so 3-parter here. We check raised on the flop versus this hijack player. Bet the turn pretty big, bet the river pretty big, and got called down by queens, no spade. So we're looking for, what did this player do wrong? What note are we taking on this player? And how are we adjusting in the future against this player? Give it a moment. Daniel kind of hitting the nail on the head.
Yeah, I think the mistake and the note are kind of obvious. But how would you guys treat adjusting, let's say? So we know, for I don't know if people watching the video later will see the chat, but I'm sure everyone knows the note, like it, and it's going to be in a PowerPoint. So yeah, so people here actually, I feel like, making a bit of a mistake in the chat where they're saying, this guy's a station, I'm not going to bluff him. Because this guy, when a stack goes in, he's a station. But is he overfloating your c-bet? Not necessarily. It's not like, so again, you have to think of this player as a player type. this guy is not going to let go of top pair when a stack goes in. So clearly you want to size up your value, go thinner for value, and not bluff him in big pots. But the kind of guy who doesn't let go of top pair, do you guys think he's floating versus a third pot with a backdoor flush draw? Or does he actually not know what a backdoor flush draw is? Which one of those is more likely?
So what you're kind of positing here is when the big pot is building and your heart rate's going up and you're starting to really pay attention, kind of adrenaline kicks in, you're playing a 100+ big blind pot, this guy's ready to go to battle and he's ready to make a crazy hero call.
Yeah.
But when the pot's small, we can't necessarily extrapolate that read to a small pot. He's not necessarily a guy who we can't bet the turn on a scare card in a small pot, or, you know, probe against his check back or something in a more like 5 to 10 big blind situation.
Well, I mean, you can take it even further, and you can say, you know, this is indicative of a fairly weak player, right? Like, this is a very out of line stationy call in a situation where you can't say, oh, but all our draws missed or something. Like, this is really I don't want to say rude words. It's a bad call. So if he's a station to this extent, he's probably not technically proficient. He's not check raise bluffing enough. He's not going to have overbets as a bet size in his arsenal. So any bet smaller than an over, I'm just kind of blasting you guys with things that to me this is automatic. If I'm not going to check raise his 75% bet in a spot he should have overbet, because this guy doesn't know how to overbet. Any spot where he splits his ranges, so let's say he skips a c bet, he's going to check back way too weak. That's very, very common for weaker players, and this guy clearly is. So there's a ton of stuff. It's not all, I don't think we wrote it all here. But basically, you can say he's a station in big pots, but you can say a lot more than he's a station in big pots in terms of, like, can we range bet 1/3 against this guy? Generally speaking, the strategy to bet your entire range on the flop for 1/3 pot overperforms massively against people who either don't know how to float well, which this guy is a likely candidate for, or don't know how to check raise enough, which this guy is a likely candidate for. So there is a ton of stuff you can do and extrapolate. And I think as we write the note, we're forming an image of who this guy is. We're going to play more hands against him. We're going to have more notes, but I would you can pre-anticipate some things based on a note like this. So if you don't just go stationy in big pots, but go like made a terrible call in a big pot, or stationy in big pots and then type doesn't know theory ? Right? Like, you can take it further than that in terms of what you're doing. Okay.
Yeah, a couple interesting questions and points before we move on to the next one. I think this comment from Hit and Knit, if the QQ guy bet an even 2BB on the flop, which he did, that alone could raise some bells, because a lot of players use preset buttons. A lot of strong players use preset buttons. So that's kind of, you know, it's not, you know, the smoking gun of how this player plays. It's not like you see the 2BB bet and you make a note, but you combine the 2BB bet with all of this other stuff we're talking about, and then it starts to become clear. To me, it makes that doesn't know theory read more likely, right? Because he hasn't even set up preset buttons, potentially.
Perfect. I love it. It makes a ton of sense. And yeah, there's a ton of information in these games. Like you said, it's not a preset button. It's not a theory size. You can kind of already know, right? Very quickly understand who you're playing against and start adjusting. So we'll go to
one other question real quick, if you could jump back for a moment. This is from Aloso, sorry, in the Lab 2.0 Discord. You had initially said the King 3 of spades bet on the river. It was like 80 into 100 or something like that. You said it was relatively big, given it was a not so good card for us. In retrospect, now that we know this about this player,
too small, way too small.
Now it's too small. Yeah, makes sense. All right, slide on.
Okay, so this one, Like I said, I'm kind of teaching you exploits in theory at the same time in this. So here, hero 3 bets ace king off. Someone cold calls. Anyone cold calling, we already say is a recreational. That's even though in theory you got to have cold call ranges. No one, very few people do this. And we get a cold 4 bet. And the first thing I want to point out is that this is actually a blunder. The cold 4 bet size is actually a fundamental mistake. And I'll try to explain the reason. So the reason is that there is a 4 bet size beyond which, if he goes, hero can't cold call the 4 bet. We have to play shove or fold. So imagine he went to $100. We have to play shove or fold, but we have to play shove or fold versus 90 and versus 80 and versus 70 and versus 60 and versus 54 and versus smaller than 54. So this is just an inefficient bet size. I hope that explanation makes sense. I think the size he should go is probably at most something like 44, 45, and that's pushing it. So this is basically, assuming he has a range that's not always stacking off, he's basically just burning money by taking wrong sizings.
I'm curious before you move on with the hand too. This guy used a really big size here, as Uri's talking about. Feel free to drop in chat if that alone would give you a read on what range this guy has, or maybe even what hands he probably doesn't have, given the large size. I'll let those come in. I'll show some comments on screen, but we can slide on.
Perfect. So okay. So when I actually have a story to tell about that, but generally speaking, let's say he went like 28, so way too small, and he was a fish, I would note, he's doing the aces thing, right? Where they go really small to lure you in a spot where, so this is kind of, he's doing the ace king thing. I would say this is, I don't have aces, I don't have kings as a range when someone goes scarily big. And I hear from some people, but what if he's leveling and he knows that we know? And my answer to that, generally speaking, is you guys should start out assuming guys at NL 200, NL 500, and I'm not going to say how high a stake you'd assume this to, but you should assume things are as they seem, and you're not against super sophisticated leveling players, and everyone knows everything. First of all, that's very far from the reality, but if it was a reality, poker would be completely unbeatable. So yeah, here we shove ace king, which I think is good with Mike's point that the sizing implies less aces and kings, so ace king's a good shove, and we get a call, and he shows down tens. We're gonna go back to the PowerPoint. So here I'm actually not gonna ask this as a question. I think tens is too loose, and the mistake that you'll find often here in low to mid stakes is that people don't recognize the context of how strong their hand is. So they're kind of used to tens has to stack off. But in this kind of situation versus a shoving range, tens is actually not very different from a hand like deuces. And so stacking off tens is probably a leak, and it probably, there are guys, when it comes cold 4-bet and someone shoves, a lot of guys, as they're learning poker, they'll blindly stick in like jacks plus ace king because they just don't know what they're supposed to do. And there are actually a lot of spots with tight ranges where ace king and queens are supposed to fold, so let alone tens. So just pointing this out, as you guys, you have the preflop prodigy app in the lab, you can explore these kind of tight range spots. You will see that there are a lot of spots where a hand like ace king offsuit or queens is actually mixed folding to pure folding. Not a lot of spots they pure fold, definitely a lot of spots they mix in folds when positions are tight. Anything else before we go to the next one, Mike?
I do have one quick thing.
Yeah.
If you're watching and you're enjoying the show, do us a quick favor. click the like button. We'd really appreciate it. It allows us to continue doing stuff like this. It allows it to reach more people, which obviously allows us to justify spending our time trying to teach you guys for free. So if you go ahead and hit that like button, we'd really appreciate it. Let's move on to hand number 5.
Yeah, and I guess I'll mention, so we're doing this webinar public, but the lab is going to have a webinar every week, either by me or by other coaches, and it's going to be very tailored to what you guys want. And kind of to reiterate to the start, I'm really trying to, in this, open your eyes to how much money there is lying around at stakes as high as, NL200 Zoom on an online site, which is a stake where people are playing the game for a living. There's so much money lying around. There's a reason this isn't the highest stake in the game. And yeah, you guys really need to pick up the money that's lying around in order to maximize your win rate. It doesn't happen on its own. So yeah, hero raises a7 off. You guys might say too loose, he should fold pre. We're not going to get into that. That's not the reason for the hand.
We can just imagine it's a7 suited.
Yeah. Or imagine one of these guys, we have a read, he's a bit tight. That could be good too. So yeah, big bet call, turn check. River villain bets half pot. So a7 has to call against half pot. You could make an argument it can even raise against half pot. If you think about the half pot size, we'd say, a 9 or better would bet bigger than half pot. So this is a size that's designed around betting with a 7, and this is a7. So it's probably kind of almost a raise in theory. And then in practice, if your opponent is not defending his sizes with traps because he doesn't expect you to raise, it's just a printing raise, right? Because in theory, when he bets the 7x size, he should have some traps. In practice, if he doesn't, this is just you just have the best hand with a7 once he goes half pot. So just something to think about. Again, if you ask the solver will probably not raise a7 or mixed raise it. And then you might be, I never made a mistake. But if we think deeper and we say, is he really defending his range because he thinks he's thinking about me mixed, I check back over pairs and then I raise, and is he at that level? And the answer is, 90% of guys, no. So would I protect it? Yeah, I mean, Daniel's asking, would I protect the range? No, I wouldn't. I'm not saying I would or that you should. I'm just saying it's unprotected, so you can raise. And yeah, I think Iggy's asking, what would he call the river raise with? So the question here is, if his betting range is a bluff or a 7, and so either he's calling with a 7 sometimes or he's always folding, and then you should raise all your bluffs. And I'm not sure which one it is. He should call with a 7 sometimes. Some guys will always fold everything. Some guys will always call a 7. We don't know who the guy is. So the baseline of theory would say raise a balanced range. That's, you take your value hands, you fit an appropriate amount of bluffs, you start like that. And if we kind of know the player type, so say we know the passive and small pots type, we don't expect that guy to bet call a 7. The queens guy, we probably do expect him to bet call a 7 if we go back to the guys we talked about before. So you could adjust your ranges against the queen guy, go bigger with a7 and go no bluffs against the 10-8 of diamonds guy from hand 1. We would probably not even bother raising a7 and just raise bluffs. So
brace yourself for the showdown, everyone.
Okay.
Yeah, so he shows up with the queen 8. Just to recap the action here, remember, we opened in the cutoff. He defended big blind. Yeah, maybe a little loose, but we could put that one to the side. He check called the flop. I don't remember the exact c-bet size, but, it kind of doesn't matter, right? What was it? Oh, my God. Actually, kind of a bigger size. We went about 3/4, right? 2/3? Yeah, 3/4. So we went 3/4 on the flop. Relatively big c-bet size. He calls queen 8, no backdoor flush draw. Check on the turn, the 9 turn, right? And then he leads for this half pot size on the river. So the question is once again, what mistake did this player make? I think this one's another pretty obvious one. But then really where the kind of rubber meets the road, where you make your money, how are you noting and adjusting against this player for next time? And this is definitely a multi-part adjustment. You're not just adjusting one part of your strategy. How are you changing it up against this guy? Give it a moment to let those answers roll in on the Gorilla YouTube, the Upswing YouTube, and the Discord for Lab 2.0 members.
Yeah, I can see Daniel asking a theory question. This is an exploit seminar. This isn't the theory seminar. But yeah, when you bluff raise, you want to unblock his bluffs. So having an ace is good. Having an 8 or a 10 to block the straight might be good. You could go with there are various hands, but I'd say that's not the point at this stake. The point is more that you can widen or narrow the range quite a lot based on the guy you're playing against.
Nikola Tesla says light value betting seems good. Definitely true. I would be a little bit more specific than that, which is light value betting on the flop seems good. And it's funny, I used to find myself in this type of spot and against this type of player quite a bit. Uri and I talked about this the other day. I used to be a heads up pro. I'd play button versus big blind spots all day. That was all I was doing. And then vice versa. And a lot of times I would end up in these river pro blinds where I see bet the flop, check back the turn. And there were players with massive, massive leaks like this where clearly they float so wide on the flop and reach the turn with an extremely, extremely wide range compared to what they should have. And then if I check back on the turn, he reaches the river with that same really wide range. So there's a couple things we can do here to absolutely mash this player once we know this. And the kind of cool thing is I think he'll usually be none the wiser because these are mainly going to be small to medium pots. A lot of them aren't going to go to showdown. That's a little bit of a hint. So yeah, let us know. Some answers have already started to trickle in on how you would exploit this player. And I'll pass it over to Uri. What do you think?
Can I start?
Yeah, go for it.
Yeah, okay, perfect. So basically this is going to sound like a cheat code, but if someone floats flops way too much, you want to bet flop with everything. After he calls way too wide, again, I'm assuming this guy's not calling twice with queen 8, right? If we see him calling twice with queen 8, bingo, jackpot, right? Like we're gonna different world of exploits, but let's assume it's just a flop float for now. So the guy floats flops too wide. That means we bet everything on the flop. We're gonna get a huge overfold on the turn because he just has too weak of a range and you can't call the turn out of position with air. So all of our air is going to bluff turn, expecting an overfold. So all your air goes bet. You can decide what you do on the river or not. That's actually not connected to this showdown. So we don't have a read there. And then all of our hands that are not trying to go for 3 streets of value would want to not bet the turn to pick up his river bluff.
Yeah, right? So this exact type of hand is kind of a great hand to have against this guy, right? Because you know you're going to bet the flop. He's probably going to call. You're going to get to check back the turn, and then you just get to snap the river. And I think you get to do the same thing. Correct me if I'm wrong, Uri. You get to do the same thing with a deuce. You get to do the same thing with maybe your weak 9s. Let's assume the turn wasn't a 9. It's a little sticky when you make trips. Pocket 5s, maybe even like ace king high, right?
Yeah, everything. The he over bluffs idea is right, as long as he's not starting to just bet every pair he has or something. He's just over bluffing, so you get to bluff catch everything profitably. And so you just go bet flop, check turn, snap river, print money. And Daniel's asking what if you have ace king? It's questionable like how much money you're giving up by not barreling the turn, because some hands that want to go for 3 streets. Yeah, I wouldn't be sure. And there's also some information leak if the guy sees you bet flop, check back turn with ace king. Again, we don't want to, even though this guy is, very unproficient in poker, if he sees you slow play, he might
ace king on a king high board on the turn.
Yeah, he might adjust the strategy a bit, and then you just don't know which way, which is a shame because now we know kind of what he's doing.
Yeah, so just to be clear, that Daniel question that led Uri down that train of thought, that would be a hypothetical, let's say it was king 9-2 against this player. Ace king is a clear 3-street hand. I'll pop open the comment again.
Yeah.
And Daniel's kind of positing, do we check back the turn with hands like this so
Yeah.
we can catch the river?
So probably yes. I'd say probably yes with ace king, maybe not with nines. But yeah, I think that's very reasonable. And again, just the frame of mind I want you guys to be in is imagine you played this hand and you saw showdown and you're like, what an idiot. How does he show up with queen eight? Everyone here is so bad. You're missing the point. That's not your job to call people bad. It's your job to be like, what's a mistake? What do I do about it? That's the process that I want you guys to have. Seeing someone make a mistake is a puzzle for you guys to solve to maximize your win rate. We're competing against not only these guys, but also the rake. So just being better than everyone at the table isn't good enough to win in poker. You need to be much, much better than everyone at the table. Yeah.
There was, I think, one exploit we didn't touch on, which is maybe we go wider when opening on this guy's big blind, knowing that we're going to end up in this spot.
Yeah.
Like we want to be in this spot against this guy, right? We know we can double barrel him to hell, triple barrel him if he happens to float turn 2, which, like you said, that's the jackpot when you're able to. He reaches river with queen 8 on this board, and you get to like bluff into like a.
Who knows? Maybe he calls you down with his queen 8.
Yeah. Well, then that's a whole extra exploit we get to do, though a different one.
Did you hear, Mike, the story about the guy? There was a guy who would actually call down all the time with hands like queen 8 on Poker Stars. He lost his. He would deposit money and lose it extremely fast multiple times, and it turned out he didn't know he was allowed to fold. So there, he had some misunderstanding about how the game worked. Maybe he thought fold would close the program or something. And he ended up getting refunded the money by the poker site.
Wow. That's very nice of them. Very generous. Just to quickly, Max279 is kind of asking for a reiteration here. So what are the adjustments? It's a several part adjustment. Starting from preflop, we will probably open wider on this guy's big blind because we want to play in position against him and find ourselves in these spots. We're going to c-bet the flop very frequently. Once we reach the turn, we're going to do a lot more checking back with our value, and especially our medium strength hands. And we're going to blast with our bluffs. We're not going to check the turn with bluffs because we can't let him find this
because the note isn't that he's a station. The note is that he floats flop too wide. That's very different than being a station. Right? A station is someone who calls you down with a pair. This guy's not intending to call down with queen 8. He just auto continues to the flop bet, and he's probably folding all those hands on the turn, so you actually get a big turn overfold. And like we're saying, we're happy to be proven wrong because then, we win money even faster off the guy.
Yeah, and really, really good question from White Ivy here, which you were kind of just covering, Uri, I believe. But he's saying the exploit is to bluff the station who continues too wide, kind of surprised. You could just not c-bet bluff the flop against that guy, and that technically is better than just doing your same thing. But you can make even more by c-betting the flop and reaching that turn node where he's too wide. You're just getting him to a later node in a bigger pot where his range is too wide. There's this concept, not to go too far down this road, there's this concept of making your range more competitive before you reach the bigger pots on the river. Like it's really bad if you reach the river with too wide of a range because now you're in kind of this no man's land and the pot's really big and you're going to make a lot of mistakes and you're going to have to overfold. You're letting him do that. You're letting him make the mistake of getting to a later street in a big pot with a range that's not competitive. And then you're in a great spot to just own him in a pot that's way too big.
Yeah, and just to be clear, like this isn't a solver video, but I actually node locked these kind of things in PO Solver back in the day. So I would make someone call flop too wide and then overfold turn, or call turn too wide and then defend river correctly, but not with the extra combos. And the amount you print tends to be very, very large in these nodes. Like it can be 3 to 4 big blinds winning with air. So
yeah, and a couple more people chimed in. I think those are all reasonable exploits. Like all these things are things we can do because his range is too wide. Max said, could we just raise the river, basically check back the turn with a bluff, raise the river? Potentially, yeah.
Yeah.
Same thing that
Oh,
Coleridge
and
said here.
guys, maybe I should caveat that I've been doing this for a while, so I'm very confident and I'm very extreme in the things I do. So, like I said, one showdown, I'm going to make big deviations. You guys don't have to do that, but I want to open your mind to the possibility of that. So you can start out small. Some guys need to collect more evidence. That's fine, but be aware that that's not a place you want to stay, and you want to practice this muscle, build the confidence, do this stuff very, very quickly. And again, take it from me, I have a lot of experience doing this stuff and teaching this stuff, and leaks are all over the place. You don't need 7 confirmations to call a duck a duck. Like, everyone here is leaking all over the place. And of course, to take advantage of a leak, we have to be unbalanced. We don't have to be, but if we want to take full advantage of it, we have to be unbalanced. And so we open ourselves up to counter exploits, and I know a lot of people that makes them feel uncomfortable. But if someone in boxing is not defending his right side, you don't play a balanced boxing style. And it's the same in poker. And if he picks up on it, he can trick you, sure. How many people are picking up on this stuff? Like, if this is brand new to a lot of you guys, it's way beyond brand new to the guys you're playing with. So people are not in these kind of things. Okay. So next hand, we open King Jack. Correct preflop open. Cool. So Jack 8 deuce. Bet 675. Looks like the same hotkey from the previous hand. Maybe the same database. Check raise, we're going to call. Turn 10 of clubs, and villain bets half pot. Now, half pot here, the first thing that jumps up to me is that this is not the correct size to use here. And this is one of the things about knowing theory. So very often, people who know theory size of the theory size, which here, I don't know if it would be pot or 75% pot, definitely not lower than 75% pot. People who don't know theory tend to look at their hand and then do something that makes sense for their hand. And if you looked at Queen 9 or Pocket 8s or Jack 8 suited here, generally speaking, you'd go bigger than half pot. If you looked at theory, you'd go bigger than half pot. And so this half pot size, to me, again, I'm doing this as a process of elimination. So imagine on the screen we have the option of him knowing theory is out, the option of him having a good, not knowing theory. If he had a good hand, he'd bet bigger. So the only option that remains is this is a guy who doesn't know theory and doesn't have a value hand, right? And you can kind of get to that just through this turn bet size, because the size indicates his level of knowledge, and his level of knowledge indicates the hand he has, right? So this is a no note necessary, right? We can build this throughout the hand. As we see the size, we can now raise King Jack, because of course he's going to have a draw. It's not like he's going to have nothing. He doesn't have 4-5 of diamonds. He has a spade draw, he has a club draw, he has 10-9, he has, that 10-9, Queen 10, he has something. So you can raise King Jack. You can also call King Jack, but I think there's a lot going on here once you start thinking deeply about the size.
Yeah, I think it's really just my experience. People play poker from fear. I think 90% of people play poker from fear, or at least make a lot of fear-based decisions. And this is a pretty scary board where you're going to be, if you're sitting there with Jack 10 or a set, even a straight, you're fearing the plethora of bad rivers, and you're not going to bet small in that situation. Your heart is not going to let you bet small. So even if you aren't studied or whatever, we're talking about someone who's just feeling it out, that when they go half pot, it really is an honest size.
Yeah, this is 10-9, King 10, flush draw, one of those hands.
I could see it being like maybe like Ace Jack. That would be kind of like the top of what I'd expect, where they like it, but they don't love it.
Sure. Yeah, I could see Ace Jack. So generally, I would say if you raise, he's probably going to fold. So it's not exactly a value raise with King Jack. King Jack is the best hand. It would still be raising just to deny equity. So river deuce, and now this guy bets 1/3. And now if we're paying attention during the turn, we're like, okay, is this a bust, a draw, or a 10? And then you can decide, do I actually want to raise my King Jack for value or just call? Depends on how far you want to take it. Here, hero calls, and we see King 10 of spades. Makes sense, right? For everything we were saying, this is the same type of hand as Queen 10 that we were discussing, where the guy's not really sure what to do, and he thinks, well, half pot makes sense for this hand. Third pot on the river, yeah, he's overplaying his hand, but fair enough. Like we said, he's not very, very proficient. Yeah, so we start going through this. This guy doesn't know how to size, and he makes that evident throughout the hand. Bet size equals hand strength, perfect note by Daniel in the chat. So a lot of the guys you're playing with are going to have these kind of leaks. And this is a kind of leak that's going to be in there in a bunch of different hands all the time. He's constantly going to telegraph to you guys what hand he has. There are various nuanced ways in which people do this. Some guys are better at it, some guys are worse at it. This is part of the reason why, in order to exploit, you need to know theory. And when you don't know theory, you're opening yourself up to exploits, even if you don't really make a big mistake. But yeah, I think, again, the note would be something like bet size equals hand strength, or doesn't know how to size bets. And the result of the note would be, if this guy overbets in some spot, we wouldn't think, oh, he just developed a balanced overbetting size. We'd think, no, he has a hand on this board that wants to overbet. That doesn't mean it's value. Maybe it's a scary card. He's trying to bluff you. Like, this isn't straightforward to use, but it's a very important puzzle piece. It can lead to very good decisions, just like in this hand, where I think Hero had options that he missed during the hand.
I think a good question from Poorhouse Trivia here.
Yeah.
Do you like his check raise on the flop? And if so, what do you do on the turn once you turn that 10?
Well, so in theory, I don't know for 100% that I dislike his size, but I do feel like it's too big. I think we went polar. When we go polarized as the c-better, the correct raise size is smaller, because a lot of our hands have very low equity and our value range is narrow. So he's supposed to, if I'm not mistaken, he's supposed to check raise smaller. I don't think that's a big deal. The check raise size, a lot of guys just autopilot it and don't study it, and there's no EV loss, and there's no information given, because he just has a check raising hotkey, and it's not like the size doesn't make sense. So I think the size is fine. What do we do on the turn with King 10? The answer would be, the main line with King 10 is to check. You could say, let's bet it for the size the rest of my range wants to go, which let's say is a 75 or 80% bet. That's not a disaster with King 10. You could get called by worse. You could get better to fold sometimes. I wouldn't be shocked if a hand like Jack 6 of hearts folds a turn. You're pushing equity against a lot of hands. Like, it's a reasonable turn bet, but the main line would definitely be to check on the turn.
By the way, there's a line you've said a few times today that I want to talk about briefly. You basically said, it doesn't lose you an EV. You've said that a few times, like doing X doesn't lose you an EV. Mm-hmm. This isn't a big EV mistake. And you're kind of, what someone might say is, you're glossing over errors, right? Like, you're seeing someone raise with A7 offsuit in the cutoff, saying that doesn't really lose any EV, or very small amount. Yeah. And they might be saying, like, but it's wrong, but it does lose EV. Like, why is that mistake not, like, why are you glossing over that mistake, essentially? And there's a few videos you have in Lab 2.0 that really opened my eyes to kind of the real mechanics of this. I believe it's in level 5, Intro to Solvers, in Lab 2.0. You talk about where the EV comes from both before and after the flop, and it's really quite fascinating. Do you want to speak to that at all here? But let's not give them too much of it because they could jump into the lab to check it out.
Yeah. So I guess what I would say is that rather than thinking of things in black and white, like is this a mistake or isn't this a mistake, the philosophy that we have throughout Lab 2.0 is how big of a mistake is it? Because if a mistake is losing you 0.02 big blinds in a 50 big blind pot, I would hazard to say that's not even a mistake, right? No one is close to that level of accuracy, and it's not worth the effort. Look at the mistakes people are making. Look at the adjustments you could make. Like, I don't want your attention to be on small mistakes. I want them. I'd like for you guys, what we're trying to do is give you a solid game plan where you only make small mistakes. You don't make any big mistakes. And then let your attention kind of be free and notice what your opponent is doing and what you can do against him. And of course, as you progress in poker, you're going to sharpen up on your mistakes. But yeah, I think that, and this is especially applicable for live games, where if you look at preflop as a black and white, raise this, fold that, you end up being a nit. But if you look at it as I could raise 15% more hands and they're barely losing any money, like it's very close to zero, that, it frees you up to be a lot more creative, and a lot more creative with your adjustments as well. Because, a lot of the stuff I'm pushing you guys to do, I'm saying you can see bet everything and then check back everything and then two barrel all your air. And all of those, they're not really sizable mistakes unless your opponent is counter adjusting.
Right. And then you end up in these situations sometimes, like if we go back to, I believe it was hand number 5, we have that ace. You don't have to actually go back, but that ace 7 offsuit. If we don't raise that small losing ace 7 offsuit preflop, we don't get into that really good spot against this guy. So yeah, it loses negative 0.02 big blinds, 0.02 big blinds, but you make it all way back and more by the guy in the big blind having that horrible probing strategy that you get to exploit, right?
Yep. Okay, cool. So we're in this one. This is
and actually before we jump into this last hand, you can pull the replayer back up, but we had a question, a couple questions that I want to talk about before our last hand, and then once we do this last hand, we can kind of end right away. So Daniel Clemente asked early on, recently watched a video in the lab from Doug reviewing Ryan's heads up play. Doug said something along the lines of, I don't focus on my opponent anymore. I just try to play optimal. I'm going to kind of bring that up on screen. Yeah. And then the question is he just relying on EV mistakes? And I will say that Doug does take a very almost dogmatic approach to game theory based play. Like, he really likes to just take comfort in the fact that if he tries to play optimally and he hits it pretty well, he's going to come out on top in general. But I would wager to say that Doug these days, while he'd still largely say that, he does exploit. When he was in a big game against Tesla, who played like every hand pre-flop and never folded post-flop and blew up pots with hands that should never be raising, Doug adjusted against that guy. So even Doug, the dogmatic GTO Doug, does adjust. Now, that said, he definitely is on the other side of the spectrum to Uri. Uri really goes about as hard as you can with exploiting.
I'm fairly out there, but I actually don't go as hard as you can. Just so you guys know, I'm holding myself back a lot when I exploit. But I would say I think it's a very common thing for heads up players, and specifically high stakes heads up players, because if Doug, first of all, in heads up, it's easier to learn the game tree, and it's more important not to have leaks than it is in 6-max. And this kind of goes for both guys, so there's less to exploit in heads up to start with. Less to exploit in high stakes, and also the game tree is smaller. In 6-max, nobody gets the full game tree. I would hazard to say even Linus Love is simplifying the game tree. Linus Love, not number one online player, debatably. simplifying the game tree in ways that cost him EV, but he knows most of it. Like if you take top 5 guys in the world, they know both of it, but everyone else is sorely lacking in 6 max. It's just such a bigger game tree that you have to simplify and fudge things over, and people are constantly in these spots where they don't know the size, so they make it up. So there's a lot more out there. And also in heads up, imagine in heads up you're playing a recreational, you just win all his money no matter what you do. But in 6 max, it's a race to see who wins the guy's money.
Yeah.
And so
someone would beat you to it.
Yeah, so doing it fast and efficient is going to get you a higher win rate. And yeah, we could go on, like the rake is lower at high stakes, so whatever. But yeah, I think both approaches have merit, like you guys are seeing. I highly advise learning and understanding theory. It has its place, but I'm very, very practically oriented when I play. And if a guy is trying to give me money, I'm not going to not take it because it's theoretically unsound.
One more question that I thought was really interesting, kind of out of left field, but from John here. If this is a live scenario, which a lot of these exploits are going to print money live, so it's a great question, very relevant. Are you making them show? He mainly plays live and won't see all the hands at Showdown. It's a great question. I'll throw out kind of my answer. I've played a lot of live poker, in particular, a lot of hands at low stakes. And it's kind of a balance with etiquette, I think. I'd love to hear your thoughts on this too, Uri, but I wouldn't necessarily do the thing where my opponent goes to muck and I'm like, wait, I want to see that. That's kind of bad vibes, right? Like you don't want to be that guy who's forcing people to show when they're trying to muck, or like they call on the river and you show and you're like, wait, I want to see what you had. That's pretty rude. So I would say don't do that unless you really, really need to know, unless you're really puzzled. I would very sparingly do that, though. It's just not good for kind of the health of live poker. It just doesn't feel quite right, and it won't make you comfortable to do that. That said, there are those scenarios where your opponent bets and then you call. And then a lot of times they'll do the thing where they like are holding their cards, but they're just waiting for you to show because, you know, they're bluffing. They were bluffing. They got caught. They're sheepish. They don't want to show. Just don't show until they show. Like get in the habit of like holding your cards and waiting till they do something. They will show their hand more often that way. They still might just toss it in the muck. And then again, I go back to fine, let them do it. You won't get the info, so be it. But act procedurally and use the procedures to your advantage. So if someone bets the river, you call, I would hold my cards and not show until they either show or go to muck and try to get that extra info.
I agree with you, Mike. And I mean, etiquette's a personal thing. I think there's a ton of value in live to having good etiquette and being invited to good games and people liking you. I think that's, you know, beyond being like the good moral thing to do. It's actually just in your best interest, generally in poker, to be nice and honest with people. That's what makes them want to deal with you. They're going to tell you if they saw your cards by accident, you know what, whatever. It pays off to be a good guy in general. And there's, what was I going to say? I forgot. Yeah, so another nice thing in live is you're not multi-tabling. You can pay attention to every single hand that you're not in. And by doing that, you just pick up tons of information. Now, It's true that some of those hands are not against you, but it's also true that some of those players are extremely unsophisticated players and they play the same against most guys. So there's a ton of information. And actually in the lab, part of what I do in the live section is I just watch live videos and I take notes. I'm like, okay, this hand means this player is passive. And then next hand, we're already adjusting to that player. So it's something to practice and be aware of. And these kind of labels for players in live would help you so much to make good decisions. Like knowing someone's passive in small pots helps so much when you're playing with them live. Yeah. Okay. Everyone ready for the last hand? Sorry, we're a bit over time.
Yeah, let's do it.
Okay. So we're here. Call small blind with king queen. Not gonna get into preflop. Third pot, we call. Turn queen. King, queen checks. Villain bets. I'll ask you guys a short question. Is the queen turn good for us, bad for us, or neutral for us when we hold king, queen? Short question for the guys in the chat. Like, is this, are we happy to see the queen or unhappy to see the queen?
See one good for us.
It's not a trick question. It's just a question. No hidden information.
Yeah, seems generally the vibe is positive from people in the chat.
Yeah. So the issue with the queen is you always want to think of your relative hand strength, and a big mistake people make in low to mid stakes is thinking about absolute hand strength. So absolute hand strength, our hand improved. But if we kind of think, what do we beat that we didn't beat before? And what do we lose to that we didn't lose to before? We now lose to ace 10 and 10-9 suited, which is 20 combos. We also lose to queens, so say 21 combos. We now beat aces, ace king, king jack, jack 8 suited, king 8 suited. And we're not going to count those, but the numbers are kind of similar. So the hands that we improved against and the hands that improved against us, almost the same amount of both. So our hand actually, despite improving, didn't really move up the hand rank in terms of how much money it wants to put in against your opponent's range.
There's also the factor that a lot of their hands that we do still beat picked up extra equity. 10-8 was pretty dead on the flop, or only had 5 outs. It's now added several outs. Any ace X has a straight draw as well. If you imagine he has ace 5 of clubs, he picked up, 4 outs.
For sure. So
roughly neutral, though, right? I think we can kind of settle on roughly neutral.
So we're supposed to call on the turn and basically hope our opponent doesn't bet big on the river. If he bets big on the river, our hand's not doing very well anymore. So here hero raises. I think this is a straight up mistake. It's a very common low to mid stakes mistake. So again, not a big note from this, but I would take a note that he overplays, just overplays on straight boards. He probably overplays on flush boards a bit as well. Very, very common mistake for these stakes. River jack goes check, check. His opponent shows this hand. Another kind of common mistake, and again, I guess because we're going over time rather than ask the question, I'll just walk you guys through it. So this hand generally, you would imagine most guys wouldn't bet it on the turn. It's actually, it's a difficult theory subject. There are situations in which this is a good turn bet where you get a king to fold and you get something like queen 10, jack 10 to call, and then it does really well as a sort of merged in between bet. That doesn't work against small blind flats, and also I doubt anyone at NL200 knows that. So this is probably just a guy barreling too wide. And then he calls turn with a pair plus a gut shot plus a nut flush blocker, which is, these are good properties for a hand. But when the board is 3 to a straight, you're going to have a lot of hands like these, and this hand should probably just be folding the turn. Because the gut shot is a 1-card gut shot, so you're drawing to something that's going to be very obvious. There's a 1-card open-ender out there that's better than this, so this hand is weaker than a pair plus gut shot usually is. So I think this should probably fold the turn.
That ace of clubs is kind of useful. Maybe we can use it to bluff the river.
I'm not sure, because it means your opponent has less bluffs.
Yeah.
When true. You have, like, a lot of his bluffs have the ace of clubs, and if he's not bluffing, you're doing very, very badly with ace queen. So it cuts both ways.
Yeah, so just to be clear here, this exploit is on the hero in the hand, kind of flipping it on its head here. We're talking about how hero played it and how we might adjust against hero.
Yeah, so how you just, first of all, you take the note and there's no direct adjustment. It's kind of a puzzle piece. But certainly there are hands in the future where you see this note and maybe another note, and then you're like, oh, now this is a clear call. Or now, his value range is actually much wider than I thought. So the note can help you make future decisions. It's not that direct, but I think the main reason I'm showing this hand is for the absolute hand strength awareness, which is one of the things that we try to develop in Lab 2.0 is it a multi-way pot? Is it a tight range situation? Is there a straight on the board? How much is your hand actually worth? Because as you understand how much it's worth more accurately, you stop making these kinds of mistakes. And here, had hero check raise turn bet river, he would actually almost be bluffing with king queen in terms of what he's going to get called by. So need to be very careful with things like this. Okay, so let me see. Yeah, I think we're way over time. So unless you have something to add, Mike,
Yeah,
we'll probably
really
wrap
all there
up.
is to add is what's in Lab 2.0. Like if you enjoyed this, if you enjoy how Uri approaches poker, it's really unique. We've been billing him as the world's greatest poker coach. I really think that there's a strong argument that he is. I mean, he's won a lot on the felt himself, millions of dollars. Several of his students have reached the absolute top of the poker food chain. And there's a reason for it. It's because Uri's strategies are backed by theory and theoretically sound, and they work, but they're also really practical. And the way he breaks down and approaches poker is very digestible and easy to understand. So if you want to learn more from him, if you want loads of exclusive Uri content along with an incredible course from Play It Smart called Max Exploit Academy, along with weekly webinars from incredible coaches like Fimo, Lewis Spencer, aka Blackout, Gary Blackwood, so many others, definitely head over to upswingpoker.com right now. Grab Upswing Lab 2.0 for 25% off. That deal expires this Friday, so don't wait too long. Head over to upswingpoker.com, join Uri in the lab, and we'll see you in the Discord if you do. It's going to be great in there. You're going to get a lot of value from the Discord as well.
Okay, thanks for watching, guys. Thank you, Mike.
Take care, everyone.